How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I think she would be sad.
So this is completely unplanned, but after waking up to the headlines, as someone with siblings, So if you don't know, if you haven't been in the loop, Harry's memoir, Spare, is coming out next week, I believe on Tuesday, the 10th of January. Now, I really don't want to buy a first-hand copy and contribute a single cent to his and Meghan's pockets, but I will be on the lookout for a second-hand copy because I just need to read that book to dispel as much as possible the misinformation, ironically, from the Commissioner of Misinformation himself, that the pages of that book will surely be riddled with. So if I don't cover every single little tidbit that has been leaked in the past, I would say 24 to 48 hours, do not fear, I'm not ignoring them. It's just that I want to focus on the more incendiary ones today. And then once I get the book and really get into the nitty-gritty and start cross-referencing with other books and other sources of information that are more credible, we'll talk about it in a lot more detail. Speaking of leaks, it's ironic that Harry, even in these interviews that are upcoming, we've seen little, excerpts from them as well, constantly accuses his family and the palace of leaking things to the press. On the one hand, he's accusing his family of leaking, and on the other, you wonder, well, how did The Guardian, a notoriously very left-swinging publication that is quite anti-monarchy, got its hands on a copy of the book before it was even released? Maybe Harry will blame the Spaniards, because apparently the book accidentally went on sale early in Spain, which makes me wonder, how accidental was it? Was it a convenient, oh, that's how the information leaked, we didn't leak it? Continuing with the theme of blaming absolutely everyone else, Harry gives us more insight into that now infamous Nazi incident. Now, interestingly, we just heard about this incident and Harry's remorse for how he behaved in the Netflix reality show. But less than a month later, we already have an entirely different and new version of what actually happened. According to Harry, in 2005, when he was almost 21 years old, by the way, I've said this before, but we have 21-year-old lieutenants in the army leading people into war. So this was no child. But innocent, sweet, naive little Harry, at almost 21 years old, was unable to choose between an officer uniform and a Nazi-inspired uniform to a costume party. And so what does he do? What anyone else would do. He calls his older brother and his then girlfriend, Kate Middleton, and asks them to help him pick. I'm sure even those of you who haven't been keeping track of the news know exactly where this is going. Once presented with this choice, Willie, who decided to dress up as a lion, which I find so fitting because someone sent me this comparison, this meme of The Lion King, with William being Mufasa, Prince George being Simba, and just Harry as Scar, the jealous, bitter, conniving, envious uncle. Brings a whole new meaning to life imitates art. But I digress. When presented with these options, the Lion King chooses the Nazi costume. In fact, Willie and Kate were so tickled by this that they were howling with laughter. And so young Harry does what any other younger brother does at almost 21 years old and goes with the Nazi uniform. The same Harry who, just like William, trained in the military and has a very deep and sound, presumably a very deep and sound, understanding of World War II. Forgive me, but I find this version of events incredibly difficult to believe and incredibly convenient. I mean, it just falls right in line with this couple's entire spiel now, which is blame everyone else, none of this is our fault. And of course, it doesn't help that Harry, at this point, much like his wife and Amber Heard and Elizabeth Holmes and everyone else we've covered on this channel, have a credibility score of 0. Secondly, Harry shoots himself in the foot. Let's pretend for 1 second. Let's go along with Harry's version. Who made the shortlist though? Who made the initial choice of officer versus Nazi sympathizer? We're not told, so presumably it was Harry himself. So Harry was depraved enough to pick the Nazi costume as an option to begin with. And he doesn't seem to bat an eye over that. That's fine. And lastly, let's take this further and say that this was all entirely true and Harry had no say in the matter. He just went along with what his older brother, who knows so much better, told him. Where was your brain in all of this? Where were your morals, your ethics, your moral compass when your older brother allegedly told you to go dressed up as a Nazi? Shouldn't you have known better? Shouldn't you have said, "What do you mean, William? You're being ridiculous"? I mean, see, none of this adds up because he presented William with a Nazi costume as an option. But it all comes down to the story keeps changing. And when a story keeps changing, you really have to start questioning its veracity. So we go on from innocent, naive, widow Harry, who didn't know the difference between right and wrong, to Harry the hero. He's putting it out there to the world that he killed 25 members of the Taliban during his tours in Afghanistan. And by the way, I really want to stress that this is no laughing matter, and I am appalled at the lack of judgment demonstrated by not only Harry, but Meghan herself, the publishers, the ghostwriter, everyone involved in this book. He may be a target now, or his family, his children. Now, people who are not new to this channel will know that I have a military background myself, in the army specifically, much like Harry, trained as an army officer, much like Harry. And what I can tell you is, it's not normal for soldiers of a sound mindset, because I'm not going to pretend there aren't people in the military who are messed up. Some may have been messed up to begin with and they just slipped through the cracks, but some become messed up. They become desensitized. So people who are more mentally sane and sound don't usually walk around bragging about how many members of the enemy forces they have killed. It's just not something that is discussed. I haven't served in the British Army or the British military. I don't know what their rules of engagement are. But even if it's not written down, it's just something that's not done. I just found it to be in such poor taste and a clear attempt on Harry's part of coming across as this war hero, potentially in response to all the allegations that he was just a puppet prince who, was just there for photo ops and didn't actually participate in conflict at all. Now I'm going to come back to Harry the hero because it ties really well into the affair of the necklace, which I'm going to call as a twist on this nasty ruse that Marie Antoinette was dragged into back in her reign. Now, according to Harry, back in 2019, Prince William decided to confront Harry at Nottingham Cottage over Meghan's behavior. So William's problem is that Meghan was being difficult, rude, and abrasive. And I think to all of us who know a lot about the background and the story, he's most likely referring to her bullying of staff and also the way she's been treating members of the royal family, such as his wife, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and his then 3 to 4-year-old daughter, Princess Charlotte. I mean, when Jason Knauf said Meghan just needs anyone in her sights, he wasn't kidding, because apparently 3-year-olds weren't exempt. So according to Harry, or I should start saying according to his ghostwriter, which Tom Bauer likes to call Meghan Markle, Harry accused William of parroting what the tabloids were saying, which aggravated William even more, so much so that it escalated to a point where William allegedly shoved Harry so hard that Harry fell right on his dog's bowl, which broke under his back and caused him visible injuries. I do want to say that I heard Tom Bauer in an interview with Megyn Kelly say that you can see a photo of Nottingham Cottage at potentially around that time, where the dog bowls were all basically stainless steel and they wouldn't have broken under Harry's weight. But I also want to say, more importantly, again, as someone who grew up with siblings, I'm a middle child and an only girl, so I was sandwiched in between 2 boys, and I'm sure this is the same for a lot of people with siblings. Things get rough sometimes, whether you're play fighting or really fighting. It's just a fact of life. Is it nice? No. Is it commendable? No. Sometimes human nature isn't exactly a shining example of how we should always behave. But I do want to stress that this is Harry's version of events, so we don't even know if this is true. Because again, Harry's credibility, 0. But assuming it's true, I always love to play devil's advocate, especially with these people, because you can just shut them down so easily, even if you believe their version of events. Why publicize it, print it out in paper, and monetize it for millions at the expense of your own flesh and blood. This is the headline that got me worked up today and made me decide to make a video before his interviews come out. People fight within families for sure. No one's denying that. But when it's your sibling, you came out of the same womb. You share almost identical DNA. This is insanity. And this is how you treat your brother, who by all accounts, including Diana's former butler, Paul Burrell, he said that William and Harry were as thick as thieves, and William was a good older brother. He looked after Harry. He cared about him.
I'm just happy to have him here with me.
And this is how Harry repays him. Just because you're public figures, that doesn't mean that we as the public have the right to find out what happens between you all as a family behind closed doors. And this is coming from the man who said that he was sick and tired of his privacy, his and his wife's privacy, being invaded by the press. And this is what he is doing. He is offering up invasion after invasion about his own flesh and blood. For what? For money? This is an already rich, privileged prince. As a prince of the blood and as prince of the United Kingdom and as the Duke of Sussex, you should be better than this. Your wife is entirely something else. I mean, she's a lost cause. She didn't have the fame and the fortune growing up, and so she's thirsty for it. And I'm not excusing her. But when it comes from her, it's almost expected. I've been covering this topic for 2 years now, and it still never ceases to amaze me how low Harry is sinking. And what does Harry do, by the way, in response to William's vicious attack? He calls his therapist. So the hero of Afghanistan, who killed 25 Taliban, who punches paparazzi in the streets, by the way. You know, he's talking as if he's some kind of a saint. And so it's okay for him to take the first swipe. It's okay for him to get into physical fights. But when William gets angry over Harry's wife being a monstrous bully and dares confront his younger brother about this, all bets are off. William's a nasty criminal bully who apparently should have charges pressed against him. This is ridiculous. And where was this therapist when Meghan needed one? This was around the same time period, 2019, when she was still pregnant with Archie. So what? There's a therapist available on speed dial for Harry when he has a little spat with his brother and God forbid his necklace broke, but when his pregnant wife doesn't want to be alive anymore, it's crickets. I see these people haven't employed a fact checker yet. And there's this whole Meghan, California hippie vibe that is permeating through this extract where Harry goes, I was calm and collected the whole time and I even offered him a glass of water at one point. Really? Again, this from the hot-headed young prince who would literally punch down paparazzi for taking photographs? Is there evidence of William doing the same? I don't think so. Before William walks out, by the way, he says, don't tell Meg about this. As if the future King of England, who dropped by to confront his younger brother about Meghan's behavior, would give two hoots about what some D-list actress who was wreaking absolute havoc in his family would think. Seriously, give me a break. And much like Meghan and Catherine's incident where Meghan alleged on the Oprah interview that Catherine made her cry, she never really explained the circumstances around that, unlike Tom Bauer, who explained that entire incident in detail. Meghan just says, it was Catherine who made me cry, that's it. She does mention something that in her mind would incriminate Catherine. And I know that this is about William and Harry, but bear with me, it's connected. She tells us on the Oprah interview that Catherine came up to apologize, delivered flowers, etc., etc. Of course, she doesn't tell us that she pretty much slammed the door in Catherine's face and rejected the apology. But that was inserted to prove that it was Catherine who was the wrongdoer. And Harry pretty much does the same thing in this extract. He says William then later returns to apologize. But that doesn't necessarily mean that William was indeed the aggressor or things played out exactly how Harry said they did. Maybe William is just a decent human being like Catherine, who didn't like this tension and this animosity in the air, especially with his younger brother, whom he loves very much, and decided to be the bigger person and come down to apologize. That's not necessarily incriminating. In fact, it's just a sign of a decent person who knows not to hold grudges, especially against people they love, and doesn't have a maniacal, narcissistic ego that prevents them from saying, I'm sorry. There is a lot more to be covered, obviously. These are merely a few extracts. But you do get the sense, from what little we've seen so far, that the whole motivator behind Meghan and Harry's actions are envy and jealousy. Of course, Meghan's directed at Catherine and Harry directed at his brother. With William and Harry, it all comes down to, Harry tells us in the title of the book, his position as the spare. William was always destined to be king. Diana was very much aware of this, and Paul Burrell, her former butler, stated that she wanted Harry to support William in his role as king.
Diana always taught Harry that his job was to support William. His job was to help him in his role to be king, not to derail him, not to pull the rug from underneath his feet, and not to destroy the monarchy.
Now, I was a baby when Diana died, so I'm not going to pretend I grew up, with the boys, or I knew firsthand, or, I was very much aware of what was going on with the royal family at the time. But I listened to a lot of commentators and a lot of people who did know Diana, and the one thing they always say is that she adored both of her boys. And while she understood their place in the monarchy, in the hierarchy that Harry suddenly discovered at the age of 38, she personally saw and treated them as equals, as her boys. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking. I'm not a mom, but I have a mom, and I'm a young woman with 2 brothers, and I know how devastated my mom gets if we get into an argument. It eats at her. She has to see us happy, united. And so I can't even begin to imagine how horrified Princess Diana would be over what her son is doing on such a public scale. It's beyond disgusting. And it's such an insult to her memory because she loved William so much. And she would hate for this to be happening over what? A D-list grifter. Whatever you want to call her, none of this was happening before she joined the fray. And this is fact. This isn't some Sherlock Holmes level of deduction. This is clear as day. And I'm not absolving Harry in any of this. But to deny that Meghan is the mastermind, that Meghan is the evil, like I said, I don't know in what video I said she's his evil advisor, his Jafar, the voice in his ear, egging him on, pushing him to be this monster. I am not a fan of blaming the woman, especially when she's the more dominant personality in a relationship, for everything that the man does. But I am a fan of looking at the facts and the evidence and seeing where it leads. So in an instance where a man like Harry wasn't doing any of these things until Meghan joined the picture and poisoned his mind, indoctrinated him, it becomes very hard to argue that Meghan isn't behind most, if not all, of Harry's vicious attacks, relentless attacks against his family. If he were doing it beforehand, then I think it would be unfair to blame Meghan, of course. But that's just not how things are playing out here. And if you don't believe me when I say this is all motivated by jealousy, well, you don't have to listen to me. Take it from the man himself. In the extract about the alleged physical fight, Harry writes that he accused William of acting like an heir, unable to understand why Harry wasn't content to be a spare. I mean, what do you even say to that? What do you even say to that when we have people who have to pick right now, in this very moment, between heating and eating? Their worries are in the basic level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Shelter and food, basic necessities of life. And we have this pretty much 40-year-old whinging and complaining about being the privileged prince that he has always been, because make no mistake, the spare has the better end of the bargain because they get all the privileges, all the lifestyle, the glamour, the royalty, all that, but without the responsibility. And if that wasn't proof of jealousy enough for you, by the way, Harry takes an even lower blow and attacks William's appearance. What are we, girls in high school? And you're no hunk yourself, mister. You're going along making fun of your brother's hairline for the whole world to read about. And all I can think is, have you had a look in the mirror, Harry? You're not too far off behind. I mean, you are younger than him. You're gonna catch up to him, don't you worry, unless, Meghan gets you on some kind of a hair transplant or whatever treatments they have for balding men nowadays, I don't know. But regardless, no one should be shamed for their appearance. But that's how low this petulant child is willing to go to make himself feel better about being the spare, God forbid, and to bring down his brother, the future King of England, who is, by all accounts, a wonderful human being. Not perfect. I always used to say this about Johnny Depp because people think, oh, you're such a fangirl, you know, he's not perfect. No one ever said he was perfect, and neither is William. No one's perfect. That's the point. But the existence of imperfections doesn't justify airing them out, especially when it's a family member, for the entire world to see. No comment from the palace or from William or from anyone at this point, but I really hope someone steps up. William, really, I really want him to step up and say something, because if the Queen thought it was appropriate to do so with her infamous Recollections May Vary statement in response to the Oprah interview, then I don't know why Prince William or King Charles can't do the same. I mean, she wasn't the monarch of an entire Commonwealth for 70 years for nothing. You know, clearly she knew what she was doing. If anything, she's demonstrated that silence isn't always the right answer. Sometimes you do have to explain, especially when things get as nasty and as heated as they have been, really, since Megxit 3 years ago now. Enough is enough. And this is just the extract. I shudder to think what's in the actual book. I'm gonna try to have some lunch. And I say try because I'm thoroughly disgusted.